From the most terrifying masks ever found to the ancient hand of a mummy, plus some disturbing human bones just uncovered from an Indiana man's basement, here are 10 of the most horrifying artifacts recently discovered. Number 10. Horrifying masks. A creepy display of masks just went on display in Israel, and they are the stuff of nightmares. The masks are said to be around 9,000 years old. They have extremely disturbing toothy grins and giant eye holes that make one wonder who would be looking at you from under the mask. The artifacts were originally made as representations of dead spirits. So far as archaeologists can tell, they were probably used in ceremonies and rituals throughout the Stone Age. Before these freaky relics went on display in an exhibition at the Israel Museum called Face to Face, researchers used 3D modeling technology to learn more about them. Debbie Hirschman, the museum curator, told Live Science in an email that they found the masks could have been placed comfortably on a person's face. The eye holes are wide enough to offer ample vision, and they were sculpted to suit human facial contours. But despite how truly amazing the masks are from an archaeological standpoint, they are still quite bizarre. After all, they're made from stone and are quite possibly the oldest masks ever found on our planet, and yes, beyond creepy. They were collected from different sites throughout the Judean desert and come from a time when humans stopped being nomadic and began residing in permanent settlements. Some of the masks even come from a cliff near the Dead Sea, where the mysterious Dead Sea Scrolls were originally found. Number 9. Bloody war relics. Some of the creepiest war relics ever discovered came from a medieval battle that took place on July 22, 1361. King Vladimir IV of Denmark sent an army of 2,500 men to the island of Gotland, which is located close to the Swedish mainland. His main goal was to capture the city of Visby, which in his opinion was becoming a little too rich and a little too powerful for his liking. The citizens of Visby were prepared for the assault, and what followed was a brutal war between simple peasants and a royal army. Unfortunately, the Swedish peasants were no match and fell to the Danish soldiers. It was an absolute bloodbath. 700 years after the bloody battle, graves were discovered on the island of Gotland belonging to those who had perished. Huge graves piled with bodies were found just outside the gates of Visby. Excavations revealed ancient war artifacts too, such as spearheads, medieval gauntlets, a skull with arrowheads still stuck inside of it, and even a crushed head petrified inside a chainmail helmet. The bodies discovered here were in brutal shape, riddled with lacerations and fractured bones from being beaten with warhammers and stabbed with spears. It was an eerie reminder that even hundreds of years ago, power was power, and anything not strong enough to match it perished. Number 8. The Crocodile Mummy. Inside the British Museum, there are many very bizarre artifacts from ancient Egypt, but one in particular sets itself apart for being much freakier than others. We all know mummies are creepy, but what about a mummified crocodile? We thought ancient Egyptians were fond of cats, but it turns out that they also worshipped crocodiles as the embodiment of a god named Sobek. To pay homage to Sobek the god, the Egyptians often mummified crocodiles after they died. Not only that, but they would hunt crocodiles on purpose just to mummify them. The creepy croc mummy at the museum comes from between 650 and 550 BC. It's about 12 feet, 3.6 meters long, and in pretty good shape all things considered. To mummify the crocodile, the Egyptians dried it in natron, which is a type of natural salt, then covered it with a concoction of beeswax and pitch, before finally wrapping it in linen bandages like a proper mummy. What researchers found truly interesting was that the animal's organs had not been completely removed. Scientists were able to inspect the stomach contents of the crocodile and see its last meal. They concluded that the crocodile had been fed huge portions of meat before it died, including good chunks of meat from a cow. This would suggest the Egyptians gave the crocodile a delicious last meal on purpose, then slaughtered it, wrapped it in bandages, and stuffed it into an animal necropolis to be offered up to Sobek. What other animals do you think ancient Egyptians could have mummified? Let me know in the comment section down below, and if you enjoy this video, be sure to hit the thumbs up and subscribe button if you haven't already. Number 7. Shrunken head. Shrunken heads are real, and they are quite disturbing. You may also call them grotesque, abhorrent, and maybe even repugnant. Researchers at Mercer University recently authenticated a shrunken head that had been brought to the United States decades ago with the hope of ascertaining whether the shrunken head was legit or not. As it turned out, the shrunken head was 100% real. The head originally came from Ecuador in the 1940s, taken back to North America by someone who would eventually become a biology professor at the school. It's about the size of a fist and is known properly as a sansa, which is actually an Amazonian war trophy. Sansas played a critical role in ancient tribal ceremonies throughout the jungle, according to anthropologist Tobias Imar Holton. The head of an enemy would be decapitated, the skull would be removed, the muscles and fat and brain would all be taken out, and throughout the process, the skin would gradually shrink. They also never removed any of the hair. The result would be an odd, shrunken face with the leftover skin from a person's head shrunken down to the size of an orange. But where would this authenticated shrunken head be displayed? It's not our decision to make where this cultural artifact ends up, Professor Kiefer said in a report for New York Times. Our job was to make sure that it was reunited with people who know more about the culture and the context to make the appropriate decision on how to display this. So after the head was verified by the university researchers, it was turned over to the Ecuadorian officials. Number 6. Caligula's mosaic. There was no Roman emperor quite as creepy as Caligula. Even his name is repulsive to say and will leave a bad taste in your mouth if you know what kind of man he was. He allegedly had some pretty inappropriate relationships with his sisters. He spent a significant amount of time on pleasure barges. He's widely recognized as being completely insane, and the 1979 film depicting the escapades of Caligula is still banned in some countries. But we're not here to talk about Caligula himself. Instead, let's take a look at a looted mosaic that was once used as a decoration for Caligula's ship. The mosaic was stored at the Museum of Roman Ships in Italy, constructed in the 1930s with the sole purpose of housing the creepy treasures taken from Caligula's 2 ships, commissioned around the year 40. But one of the mosaics vanished. It recently turned up as a coffee table in New York City. According to NBC News, it somehow was purchased by an antiquities dealer in New York, though no one is sure when or under what circumstances, and then made into a table and used in his apartment on Park Avenue. Luckily for history buffs, the dealer was busted with the mosaic and it was finally brought back to Italy in 2021. Number 5. Maya drug containers. Researchers with Washington State University have been inspecting 14 miniature ceramic vessels that once belonged to the Maya civilization. The vessels have been dated back to between 750 and 900 AD. They were buried over 1,000 years ago on the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico. But here's the creepy part about them. Archaeologists were pretty sure after digging them up that they had been used for some kind of drug. Scientists were quite baffled by this and immediately got to work figuring out what the ceramics once contained. They utilized chemical analysis to see what drugs were stored inside. First, they found traces of tobacco, but that's not all. They also found residue from Mexican marigolds. This suggests that marigold was added to the tobacco to make it smoother and nicer for smoking. The sad part is they didn't actually figure out what drugs the Mayans were using. According to David Gang, one of the professors working on the project at WSU, there was no available biomarkers to say what was stored inside. However, we do know that the tobacco was probably used with some kind of hallucinogenic plant that they smoked during ceremonies and rituals. Number 4. Bone arrows. A collection of arrows from the Stone Age has been found in the Netherlands and dated back approximately 7,000 years. Hundreds of spiky barbed points washed ashore, likely used by the old hunter-gatherers who lived in the stretch of land called Doggerland between England and mainland Europe. What makes this particular discovery so fascinating is that the arrows were made from bones. Some were deer antlers, but quite a few of them were human bones. The reason why is even more incredible. Tribesmen actually crafted the arrows from the bones of dead hunters, hoping to invoke the skills of the dead person they were made from. As you can imagine, the ancient hunters of Europe were very selective about which skeleton they ripped apart and scavenged for raw material. They only wanted to use the bones of the most skilled warriors. If there was no skilled warrior to choose from, they would instead make their arrowheads out of animal remains, usually from the bones or antlers of deer. Number 3. Bones in the basement. Speaking of bones, a huge stash of illegal artifacts, including thousands of human bones, has been found inside of an Indiana man's basement. The find was made by the FBI's Art Crime Unit. The investigation went on for years as they were trying to trace stolen antiquities. These antiquities included priceless relics that had been taken illegally from historical sites around the world. The FBI raided the home of Mr. Don Miller, discovering about 42,000 items stashed inside of his house. When he was caught, he was already in his 80s. He'd already gotten away with a life of stealing artifacts, including Aztec figurines, an Egyptian sarcophagus, a pair of mammoth tusks, and jade from the Ming Dynasty. Miller had even desecrated ancient graves, as the FBI found at least 2,000 human bones in his house. This is a little unusual, as most people that steal antiquities like this are only interested in the artifacts, but this guy was the ultimate grave robber. The discovery upset many Native American communities especially, because they have a special reverence for the deceased. The FBI now has the momentous task of returning the bones and artifacts back to where they belong. Number 2. Roman anatomy. The creepiest and strangest Roman engraving ever has recently been found during the construction of a new road in England. The giant engraving is what you might call NSFW. It's a large organ belonging to the male species, seemingly absent of any body or context at all. It's almost like what you'd find graffitied on a high school bathroom stall, except this lewd piece of artwork was crafted over 2,000 years ago. According to Steve Sherlock, the lead archaeologist for this excavation, the phallus was seen in Roman times as an important symbol of strength and virility. And wait until you hear the next part. Roman fighters would even wear charms engraved with boy parts before they went into battle for good luck. In comparison, imagine wearing the same thing before heading into your first day of work. You know, a good old wiener necklace for luck. Number 1. Ancient Mummy Hand. A mummified hand was separated from its mummified body sometime between the mummy being buried 2,800 years ago and its hand being smuggled into the United States from Egypt in the early 2010s. The blackened mummy hand made it to Hollywood in 2013, wrapped in cloth and stuffed in a parcel. It was registered as a movie item and valued at only $66. At the Los Angeles International Airport, the creepy mummy hand was smuggled as a prop for a big-budget production, but it never got used in a movie. Instead, it was later surrendered by the person who imported it and then seized by the US government as part of Operation Mummy's Hand, an operation aimed at stopping the smuggling of illegal artifacts. Still, the really eerie part is that nobody knows where the rest of the mummy is or who even got a hold of the hand in the first place. You would think that somewhere in some national museum there's a mummy in a display case missing a hand. It's safe to say that they need a hand in figuring this one out. Thanks for watching. What do you think about these creepy discoveries? Which one is the strangest or creepiest to you? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to hit the subscribe button for more astounding videos right here on American Eye.